Hey folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and I'm very excited because today we're going to be doing a shootout between two models, and that is the Squier Classic Vibe 60s Mustang versus the Fender Vintera II 70s Mustang. As always, with previous head-to-head videos, I'm going to be unboxing these bad boys, giving you my first impressions out of the box. Then we're going to be throwing them on the workbench to see if they need any work or setup to get playing right. And then we're going to be doing sound demos through the trusty old Fender Princeton Reverb reissue, as well as a number of different effects pedals. And then in the end, I'm going to be giving you my final first impressions of each, and then letting you know how each of them stack up on their own and as compared to one another. I just wanted to start off by thanking the kind folks at Zounds for sending both of these units over on loan to me for review. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to be starting off with the Squier. I am expecting this to be about as unceremonious as all of the other Squier unboxings that we've done. And there it is. Awesome. So believe it or not, I actually haven't had any of these in for service. The last Squier Mustangs that I've had in that I worked on were many years ago when the vintage modified line was out, and a number of folks had brought me those to set up and mod. But first of all, I don't think that the Mustang is quite as popular as its other offset siblings, such as the Jazzmaster and even the Jaguar. And so I think that probably explains why. And on top of it, because these are budget instruments, I think that most folks are happy to try to do the setup on their own and not want to spend money on a guitar tech, and I don't blame them, honestly. So first impressions out of the box is that this thing is fairly lightweight. I would definitely guess that this is under 8 pounds. It feels fairly good in hand. The neck is not too slim nor too thick, a nice medium C profile. I unfortunately already am feeling some fret sprout, which is pretty common for these Squiers, although not super bad, to be honest with you. And that's to be expected, especially with guitars in this price range. But as I've said before, can definitely happen on even much more expensive instruments because it's due to the environmental conditions which guitars are stored in, even if they're in the box. Now, quickly going over these specs, this is a poplar body with a gloss polyurethane finish on both the body and the neck. It is a 24-inch scale guitar, so short scale, with 22 frets. Here we've got a maple neck with a Indian laurel fretboard, and unfortunately you can see that it is very, very pale and dry looking, which is very common on these guitars that have the Indian laurel fretboards. It's got a 9.5-inch radius, as well as narrow tall frets, which are quite a bit taller than your vintage style frets. Continuing on with the neck, this does have your standard economy style Kluson tuners here. They are fairly decent quality overall, not something that I would be rushing to swap out right away. They are a 15:1 gear ratio, similar to the Gotos out there, just less quality than Gotos or even the ping tuners that they use on the Vintera models. And despite the fact that this is under $500, this does also feature an actual bone nut, which is nice to see. Now moving on to the hardware, we've got a vintage style dynamic vibrato, and we've also got a fairly nice 52mm string spacing 9.5-inch radius bridge. I actually do think that the bridges that come on the Squier Classic Vibe offsets like this, as well as the Jaguar and the Jazzmaster, are good bridges overall and just need a tiny bit of Loctite Purple 222 to keep the bridge from sinking. So you just put a dab or two of that on one side of the height adjustment screws on either side of the bridge posts, and that should help solve 90% to 99% 99% of the issues that you might have with these bridges. Otherwise, that 52mm string spacing is the same as found on most of the premium aftermarket bridges that you find out there. Now, moving on to the electronics for pickups, we've got two single coil Mustang style pickups, as well as your classic Mustang wiring configuration, which can be a bit confusing, and I really don't know what Fender was thinking when they did this back in the day. But basically, just to dispel all confusion, if you want to turn on a pickup, you want it to either be all the way to the left or all the way to the right, because these are three position switches, right? And in the middle, they are off. Right? So there's no difference, for example, this being the switch that controls the neck pickup, there's no difference between having it face towards the neck or the bridge if that's the only pickup that is engaged. So same thing goes for the bridge. All the way to the right towards the bridge is on, and all the way to the left is also on, in the middle is off. Now, when you want to do both pickups together in parallel, you want those to be facing in the same direction. So in this example here, we want to have your classic both pickups on middle position. So both of these switches are facing towards the neck, right? Now, when you face them in opposite directions, whether both facing outwards with the bridge pickup facing towards the bridge and the neck pickup facing towards the neck, then you've got your out of phase tone. And same goes for having both towards each other, right? And there is no difference otherwise between all of those. So there's a redundancy here, which has always confused me about the Mustang and why they did that. It seems like a waste, and I feel like there could have been other more useful configurations that could have been had. The thing that made the most sense to me was to have one of them be the pickup selector switch. So for example, neck pickup, then middle, and then your bridge pickup, and then have the other switch control tonal options, such as maybe having both pickups in series, and then having one be the parallel switch when you've got both pickups engaged, and maybe the third one could be out of phase or something. As with other Squier Classic Vibe offsets, the electronics under here are nothing to write home about, but are completely serviceable. They're your typical alpha pots, 250K for both your volume and tone, as well as a 0.047 capacitor. And then the rest of the electronics are your budget import spec stuff, the PVC coated wiring, as well as your import jack. But I am happy to report that these guitars are actually shielded with black shielding paint inside of all of the control cavities. So before we move on with the review, let's go ahead and actually get this, this vibrato arm installed here. And from the factory, it's set to a pretty playable action. Definitely not too high, not too low. Not really getting a fret buzz here, so that is a good sign. But even just a tiny bit of bending threw this guy way out of tune. So that's one thing that we are definitely going to do, is to stretch these strings a bit, and we are going to do that after we check out what's going on with the vibrato, because this thing is going to be going way out of tune like crazy if we don't address those things. But as far as the overall feel and the stock setup here is concerned, it feels really good. The neck doesn't feel overly bowed. I'm just gonna go ahead and check. No, the neck is almost perfectly straight, which is surprising. Yeah, on both sides too. And we can check with our gauge to see what the relief actually is on this neck, but that's the one thing. It doesn't seem to want to stay in tune too well right now. Even very, very minimal bends is sending it out of tune. And that's not, again, because of the tuners. that's coming down to the fact that they've put nines on this very not optimally set up cigar on the dynamic vibrato here. The other thing that I just thought of, aside from the vibrato that could very well be leading to the guitar detuning so quickly, is that the bridge might actually be sinking. That is a very, very common issue on the classic vibe models, is that they are good bridges, but the tolerances for the height adjustment screws inside of the bridge posts are not very tight at all. And they're loose and very often do result in the bridges sinking, sometimes in a matter of a minute or 2 minutes of playing. And so that's another thing, aside from the setup of the dynamic vibrato, that could be affecting our tuning right now. So we are just going to very quickly, before doing anything else, just plug in, get our first impressions on the sound of this. We can measure the output of the pickups and see what kind of output we're getting here. Are they vintage spec pickups, or are they like other Squier classic vibe sets where for some reason they have a vintage spec wound neck pickup and then a super hot bridge pickup? All right, so we are plugged in. We've got a nice dry signal through the Princeton Reverb reissue. And the Mustang is definitely not as nice to have in the lap as the Jazzmaster and Jaguar. But we're going to start off with the bridge pickup. Okay. Our E already went crazy out of tune. The whole thing is just going, it will not stay in tune for the life of it right now. Okay, we're not going to touch the vibrato arm at all, not even to move it, and just see if it can even stay in tune. So there we go. There's our bridge pickup tone. Let's go ahead and do both pickups on. I mean, sounds overall pretty good so far. Let's do just the neck pickup now. And then both pickups now, but out of phase. I don't think that the bridge is actually sinking. I think we were going way out of tune before because of how I had to move the vibrato arm out of the way. And so any kind of interaction right now with the cigar is making this thing go mega out of tune. Back to our bridge pickup real quick here. Nice. Let's do both pickups in parallel. It's feeling very, very comfortable, very playable right now. The stock setup, again, aside from that vibrato, is overall pretty good. Let's go now to the neck pickup. Sweet. And then once again, out of phase. Sweet. overall, the pickups don't sound too bad. They are very lively. Even the neck pickup by itself is not super duper muddy to me. Maybe a little bit. But it's got a nice darkness that, you know, I kind of associate with neck pickups regardless. I think first impressions wise, it sounds good. I mean, I would be happy to rock this as it is. The pickups do not sound atrocious, not overly muddy. The out of phase position is nice and lively, sparkly, loud. Other Mustang models, I feel like the out of phase position can sometimes be a little too thin, a little too quiet, but it's very present here, which is nice. Let's try it with a little bit of overdrive and see if it can hang. Nice. Let's try both pickups. And neck pickup by itself. I think this is where we're starting to hear maybe a lack in definition in the pickups. They are starting to sound a little muddier to me. And this is just with my Timmy V2 pedal. And it's the same settings that I always use. I don't have the bass or the treble rolled off, so it should be a pretty transparent overdrive, but it just sounds like it's starting to get a bit muddy. So yeah, neck pickup here. Not bad. Now let's try out of phase. Not bad. Not bad. That's the out of phase with overdrive here. Now both pickups on, in phase. A bit muddy for the both pickups in parallel. Neck pickup by itself. Very muddy on that one. And then our bridge pickup by itself. It's a shame. Out of habit, I always kind of want to end a riff with, you know, doing a little vibrato arm action, whammy bar action, if you will. And I cannot, because it would be pure chaos on this. And we'll try it before this hits the bench. We'll try it. The out of phase sounds the best to me, actually, with the overdrive. It sounds the most articulate to me when it's in the out of phase mode, and also just the bridge pickup by itself. So let's try it with an even more transparent overdrive here. This is with the Way Huge pork loin. Let's try it with just the bridge pickup. Both pickups together in parallel. Sweet. The great thing about the pork loin and why it's one of my favorite overdrives of all time is the fact that that there's a clean blend, and I think that that just gives us a lot of that sparkle and transparent overdrive tone overall that you don't really get with a lot of other overdrive pedals that don't have a clean blend. So yeah, that, and it's called the soft clip injector. So it's not meant to be super intense, but it really just sounds like we're pushing the amp to cook a bit more, and I love that about it. So now let's go ahead and do neck pickup by itself. Nice. And then our out of phase tone. Overall, I think the pickups sound good. Not bad at all. You know, they're not something, I wouldn't say that they're the best sounding Mustang pickups ever, but I am curious to see what kind of outputs we are getting on these, if they are just vintage spec Mustang pickups, or do we have that super hot pickup. Again, let's go ahead and just try to see what happens with our vibrato. We're going to go ahead and just test just how bad things get if we try to use our vibrato in its current configuration, and then we're going to throw it on the bench again and just see if we can actually make this this stock vibrato usable using, you know, the standard approach that I do to setting up a dynamic vibrato well. Is it actually going to work on this thing? I am very curious to see. We'll just leave it clean for now, and actually not bad. So actually, I'm gonna eat my own words there. It seems that it is actually staying in tune. Fascinating. So let's go ahead and check our tuning very quickly. Okay. It made us go a little flat on the E. A little flat across the board. But not by much, actually. Really, I think at the end of the day, if you were fine to rock the Mustang vibrato in a configuration that's meant to only depress the arm and not have it actually be floating, for both pulling up as well as pushing down, as a push down only vibrato, this is all right, aside from the fact that the arm is, look at how high and how steep of an angle that arm is. It feels not great. I'm feeling things like clicking around, and it almost feels like I'm going to snap a string. Yeah, I'm doing some pretty deep bends, and relative to itself, I mean, it's not going too badly out of tune, which again is shocking to me. So I am curious to see how much better we can get the setup of this thing. We're gonna actually try to set it up in such a way that allows us to also be able to pull up. Will we be able to do that on these stock strings? I do not know, but I am pretty pleasantly surprised, and that has been the pattern, I feel like, with the Classic Vibe units so far, especially in the context of the head-to-heads against, you know, their more expensive Fender counterparts. Hey folks, Eddie from the present here. And actually, it's been a couple months since this video was filmed, and I haven't had a chance to edit it until now. And since then, I've actually released a more comprehensive and streamlined version of how to set up a Mustang dynamic vibrato for floating operation in that video, which I'm gonna leave a link to up here as well as down in the description. I do the same process that I would have covered in this video here on another Squier Classic Vibe 60s Mustang, but the big difference is that that one is less than 30 minutes long, and the one that I ended up doing here was probably over 4 hours long. A little excessive, a little gratuitous. I know there are massive nerds, offset nerds among you that probably maybe would have loved to sit through that, but I figured most of you probably want a guide that is a lot easier to digest, and so definitely check that video out if you are interested in setting up your dynamic vibrato for floating. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a Squier. These same basic tenets and principles apply to your Vintera Mustangs, the Japanese ones, as well as your vintage and custom builds. Now, I also did want to mention a couple of things that ended up getting edited out of the final cut of this video. And the first thing and most important for you to know is that I did end up swapping out those super light 9 to 42 gauge strings that came stock on this Squier Mustang, and I put in a set of D'Addario 11 to 49 gauge strings instead. Just overall, that or a minimum of 10 gauge strings are my recommendations for Mustangs across the board. It just helps with the setup and stability of the dynamic vibrato, especially if you want it to float. And I did end up covering the rest of the steps that are included in that full floating dynamic vibrato setup video, including putting the little nylon insert in between the cigar set screw and the vibrato arm, so that you're no longer getting all of the squeaks and the metal on metal noises and grittiness that you typically feel if you do not have that nylon disc in between. I also ended up going over using tri-flow on the cigar posts and the actual knife edge of the vibrato plate itself. That just ensures a smooth operation that helps for it to consistently come back to perfect center every time. I also covered the importance of string stretching, as well as lubricating the nut slots. So yeah, again, if you are interested in that kind of setup on your own Mustang, check out that video. Also, I have had a number of folks ask me to open a Patreon that has these more extended kind of workshop vids. If you're interested in something like that, let me know down in the comment. If I get enough requests from folks, maybe it's something that I will consider. Anyway, without any further interruptions, let's get back into the video. So I think we've succeeded. This feels fairly close to the vintage Mustang that I have. What I love about the floating setup on a Mustang vibrato is it's just got a really responsive kind of touch and feel to it, even more responsive than the Jazzmaster and Jaguar tremolo. It's got a more extreme range for sure than a Jazzmaster and Jaguar tremolo, but once you got that dialed in, it's like heaven. I love being able to kind of slightly pull up on the Mustang vibrato. It's just really, really nice. And it's different too from a Mustang vibrato that's set up only to press on. Very, very different feel. That's kind of all we had to work with when we first unboxed this thing. But thankfully, we persevered and made it through. Listen, it's going to go a little bit out of tune for right now because we haven't done the full setup yet, but I just want you to hear this. But we can also pull up and down. And that, for me, is absolute Mustang heaven. My goodness. And we can compare it very quickly to my vintage Mustang. And you can see that the vintage Mustang will have very, very similar range to it. This Mustang is forever going to smell like an attic. Anyway, here we go. You can hear even more range. There's even more upward range on this one than the Squier. You can just hear how much we can bend it up. Yeah. Now I know it sounds not for everybody, but the fact that we were able to get within probably 85% of that on the Squier without having to replace the vibrato is nothing short of a friggin' miracle. Honestly, I'm so glad that we took the time to dial in this vibrato because while it doesn't feel as good as my vintage Mustang, I'd say it's within a couple stone throws of it for sure. It's definitely not as refined. I mean, you know, my buddy Mark B did a deep dive on Mustang vibratos a little while ago, and he came to the conclusion, along with many other folks in the offset community, that, you know, the vintage vibratos are the gold standard. Not even any of the other Japanese or Korean reissues can really touch that. But yeah, the fact that this stock vibrato on this less than $500 Mustang can be set up in a similar and also stable way is definitely very encouraging, and makes this that much more easy to recommend. It's heaven. It's offset heaven. I used to poo-poo on this vibrato so much. I've basically agreed with the sentiment that so many folks out there have, because this vibrato unit really does get such a bad rap, especially the ones on these classic vibes, but even in general, just the design of it, how finicky it is, and just what it takes to really dial it in. There is so much back and forth. There's so much iteration to get it dialed in right, and a lot of folks give up all too soon. I'm stoked, and honestly very, very pleasantly surprised, because I was going into this thinking that not only was I going to have a hard time with this guitar, but that I was going to be less than impressed, and actually quite the opposite has happened here. So my overall final first impressions of the Squier Classic Vibe 60s Mustang is that, especially for the price, this is a fantastic little Mustang. It plays like a good Mustang should, so long as you're coming at it with a good approach, and that you do it with patience, and that you do take the time and effort required, especially if you are chasing that kind of holy grail floating dynamic vibrato setup that I went for. I think you will find that the time and effort put into it is going to yield, you know, a worthwhile result. And I definitely would put this up even against more expensive Mustangs. What I really love about this guitar in particular is the feel and sound. The neck is really great. It's, again, not too thick, not too thin, a very comfortable, I'd say medium to slimmer C profile. I really liked the pickups actually on this thing. They are vintage spec, unlike other Squier offsets like the Jazzmaster and the Jaguar. You don't have a really hot bridge pickup on here, so I like that both of the pickups have a kind of vintage flavor to them. And while they got a little bit muddy, particularly on the neck pickup, and when both pickups are engaged, when using certain overdrives, I think overall clean and using the right kind of dirt yields a nice articulate and sparkly result that is a good platform for a bunch of different effects and amps. I also like the fact that this comes with pretty decent hardware overall. The tuners were nice and smooth, and also held tune after we finally stretched out these strings. And the bridges on this, like I've said with other classic vibe offset models, is pretty good. And this one already came with the bridge height adjustment screws being wrapped in some kind of cellophane to keep it from sinking over time. So that is a nice touch. And the dynamic vibrato here, I was expecting it to be way worse, and it definitely did take a bunch of time to dial into the way that I wanted it to be. But again, overall, I think it is perfectly serviceable. But I still, in the end, highly recommend you getting one of the Korean aftermarket units, or even a Japanese one, because those would definitely perform and be even more stable and smooth than this one here. Now, I'm going to be very, very curious next time to see how the Vintera II 70s Mustang stacks up. Now, I know that it's based off of a slightly later era of Mustang, but I think the two models are still going to have a lot in common, and based on a couple of the previous head-to-heads that I've done between the Squier Classic Vibe versions versus the more expensive Fender counterparts, I am going into it expecting that the Fender is going to need more dialing in potentially. But after this experience, which is probably the most arduous of the classic vibe offsets that I've had to set up during an unboxing video, I am hoping that the vibrato on that one is not as finicky to set up in the same way as we did this. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope it was informative as well as enjoyable, especially if you have been on the hunt for the perfect budget Mustang for you. If you're looking to get one of these new, I highly recommend you get one from today's sponsor, Zounds. They are definitely my favorite music gear retailer out there, especially because they make it so easy for you to get the gear that you want and need now, and also split them up into installments. This one, for example, can be split up into 6 installments of $75, which is a lot better for a lot of folks out there than putting up the $449 plus tax right up front. Zounds, unlike other retailers out there, do not use any predatory lenders, and all of their payment installment plans are always interest-free. They don't do any type of background checks or credit checks. They don't even need your social security number. And so I really do appreciate that about them. And thank you again to the kind folks at Zounds for sending this unit over on loan to me for review. I'm curious to know what you all think. Do you own this model? Do you have any experience with the Classic Vibe 60s Mustang? Definitely let me know down in the comments, especially if you have your own setup tips on how to dial these in to play awesome and stable. I know that I and the rest of the offset community would greatly appreciate it. As always, if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button as well as a notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And if you like my videos and appreciate what I do, also go ahead and hype this video up using YouTube's newer hype feature. It helps my videos reach an even wider audience, and I would definitely appreciate it. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars, buying and setup tips.